What we need is not more medication, but more education, because the best prescription is knowledge. This is Exposé coming to you live from Lagos, Nigeria, every Monday on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook simultaneously. I'm the regular host, Tony Akinyemi. Don't forget, what we need is not more medication, but more education, because the best prescription is knowledge. Hello and welcome to Exposé with Tony Akinyemi this beautiful Monday evening, 8 p.m. Nigerian time, on Facebook and YouTube simultaneously. I'm your regular host, and it's always my pleasure to bring you health information for your health transformation. In the last two episodes, we've been talking about environmental pollution. In episode 1, we looked at agrochemicals and their impact on the environment and human health. And in the second part, we looked at air pollutants, both indoor air and outdoor air. And in this third episode, we are going to be looking at neurotoxicants, particularly qualified as notorious neurotoxicants. As we go on in this conversation, you understand what neurotoxicants are, and we'll be paying particular emphasis on two of those neurotoxicants. There are many of them, but we'll be zeroing in on two of them, particularly in our environment, their impact on health, and how to make sure we minimize our exposure to them, and how to mitigate the outcomes of those who already are exposed. Again, we are honored to have with us to answer questions on this very important subject, all the way from the Obafemi Awolowo University, Professor Joshua Ojo. You're welcome to Exposé, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a pleasure to be here.
So today we'll be looking at notorious neurotoxicants. Very big grammar there. Many of our viewers are not scientists, so they always want these things broken down and simplified. So what are notorious, or let's start with neurotoxicants. What are neurotoxicants before we use the adjective notorious to qualify them? What are neurotoxicants?
They are materials that are toxic to the nervous system, to the brain. So they affect us in so many ways. And we are particular about sharing this information because many things that we underlook, but we underplay, they are actually very, very important from the point of neurotoxicity. Neurotoxicity is not just when people go out, schizophrenic attacks, saying they are on the road, walking naked, which of course is obviously a neuro problem. But it can be as bad as affecting the IQ, the intelligence quotient. It has to do with hyperactivity. It boils down to things like gait, ability to coordinated. And there's one particular issue that is worsening, getting worse and worse with the day. That is autism. Autism spectrum disease. Gotten the prevalence is, the incidence is getting higher and higher all over the place, including here in Nigeria. And we pretend, I'm sorry to use that word, as if we don't know what is the cause. Because we hear literature people say we don't know what actually the cause. But there are a lot of evidences that these are due to neurotoxic effects of some of chemicals, mainly these two which we are looking at in this episode, mercury and lead. So in that wise, I believe they are notorious because they're also so commonplace here, and we are not handling them properly, in my opinion. So to answer your question, neurotoxicants are materials that are toxic to the nervous system and brain in particular, and of course, the development of the brain system.
Thank you, sir. You have mentioned two of those neurotoxicants, lead and mercury. And those are the two that I would like us to really discuss extensively today. Of course, we will touch on others as well. But apart from lead and mercury, can you also list a few others just for the sake of mentioning them? A few other neurotoxicants.
Many things can affect the microwave radiation, for instance, could, particularly brain of children, little children, it could. And I'm afraid there might be other chemicals which I am not quite familiar with. There are chemicals, but I know microwave radiation could be neurotoxic. But most attention are being on mercury and lead, I should say.
Yeah, I read a book by one professor. He's a neurosurgeon in the US. The title of the book is Excitotoxin, the taste that kills. Excitotoxin, the taste that kills. That's the title of the book, written by a professor of neurosurgery. And he also identified things like MSG and some artificial sweeteners like saccharin, like aspartame, and what have you, as also neurotoxic, things that can cause derangement, particularly in the central nervous system of individuals. But we are dealing with lead and mercury that are heavy metals here today. Now, I want to ask this second question. Why are lead and mercury rated so hazardous? Why are they considered so hazardous?
Not considered hazardous, they are actually hazardous. Measurements have shown that actual measurements have shown that lead, mercury are top neurotoxicants. They affect the brain, the IQ, and they are well documented in autism, in hyperactivity, and all that kind of disorders. They are well implicated. They are now particularly highly rated, in my opinion, because of they are just everywhere. They are just everywhere, and so the exposure to them is rampant and all prevailing. So that might be why we have to pay special attention to them. And there are things we can work on. Unlike the MSG, which you mentioned, which individuals might do something about. These guys are environmental in the sense that we need to take collective action if we are to really make headway in dealing with them. So those are the reasons why we will want to draw special attention to them more than the others. Because we need collective action to get results, not just I will cut down on my intake of MSG, I cut down on my use of phone, I will do that or whatever. Some of these things are in the environment. And if you don't deal with the source, they are all in soup together.
Can you give us a few examples, sir, of the kind of health problems that exposure to mercury and exposure to lead can cause in a person? Somebody has lead toxicity, for example, or mercury toxicity. What kind of symptoms, what kind of ailments, what kind of problems can it cause for somebody who is exposed?
As heavy metals, like you mentioned, they have impact on several organ systems, the kidney, the cardiovascular, the immune system. They are all impacted by these two metals. But we would like to draw particular attention to the neurotoxicity. Okay. Lead is very well known. We are all, many of us can still remember what happened at Zamfara. What happened at Zamfara was acute lead poisoning.
In Zamfara State in Nigeria?
Yes, in Nigeria, yeah. in places like Abade and Jagama. It was in the news. It was discovered by the MSM, Medicine Sans Frontiers, the people. They found that children were dying in their hundreds. So because it was acute. And so at the acute level, at some level, it can lead to paralysis of the brain, what do you call it, epilepsy, and all those neuro issues. And they die. In fact, they were dying in their hundreds. That's why it attracted global attention. Something at a lower scale, it happened also in Niger State. So we know that the impact could be as serious as death within a few days. That is well established. It's also well established that the neuro aspect, this issue of IQ, also developmental, people have autism. Autism is a big issue today, and lead and mercury together are implicated, of course, with pesticide. But lead and mercury are big issues there. So, of course, there are also issues with cancer. That is lead in particular is associated with cancer, with developmental toxicity, children not growing well in the womb, reproductive toxicity, low sperm count, stillbirth, all those negative outcomes of pregnancy. They are all associated with lead, well established. But the neuro aspect is generally underplayed. Like in Zamfara, for instance, once the children stop dying, because we do lead chelation therapy and all that, people said the problem was solved. And we said, no, the problem is still there. Why? So we like to pay attention to not just the acute people dying right away, but all the other underlying ones, reproductive toxicity, cancer, developmental toxicity, they also, particularly the neuro. Sir, what do we call this? This disorder in children getting hyperactivity. It's a big issue. I forgot the exact names. ADHD, what do you call affective? ADHD, and there is a class of. They are causing a lot of problems. People are misbehaving in people are getting, disruptive in society, leading to crimes. All these things are linked, and it's just because people get intoxicated with mercury at level that we consider non-toxic, but they're having that impact, and those impacts are well known. That is the point I would like to make. They are well known, and in many countries, a lot of efforts is made to minimize exposure to it. Here, we don't see it as a problem at all. But it is.
Right. Quite extensive there. So lead toxicity and mercury toxicity can affect almost every system in the body, the reproductive system, the cardiovascular system, particularly the nervous system, the central nervous system. And our focus in this discussion is the effect of these heavy metals on the nervous system. That's why we call them neurotoxicants. Okay, and you hit on one particular one there that is still a subject of a lot of debate out there. That's autism. The establishment still denies vehemently that mercury has anything to do with autism. But then, of course, like you said, there are a lot of studies and publications that have established the link. We know for a fact that these metals actually have negative effects on our central nervous system when we get exposed to them. So we will still come back and discuss some of these things a little bit more later. But for now, I want you to help us, identify the regular sources and exposure pathways to lead and mercury. How do people get lead and mercury in their bodies?
Lead, of course, I had this talk with the NYC people last week somewhere, and they were saying if lead is that bad, why do you have lead around? Lead is, of course, it's very useful. Lead is a natural resource, and people use them, but we got to understand that it could have deleterious impact. Lead is, we use that in fishing rods, we use guns, what do you call it? Gun bullets are made of lead. Bullets are made of lead, and lead is not necessarily a bad thing. It's when we don't manage it very well that it becomes issues. I'm going to talk about paints later on as a peculiar issue here, but most paints all over the world contains lead, although they are doing something about it in many other places, not in Nigeria. You have legacy lead from exhaust. It used to be that gasoline was the major source of lead before in the world, where we have leaded gasoline. And that's a big problem for us in Nigeria because we use gasoline almost more than any other country in the world because it's air. We use it like water. Everybody uses it. And the deposition, it deposits close to people. It doesn't have long range. And so we have traffic, we have people, we have markets along those sides. So it was a big problem to us. Nigeria was one of the last countries to phase out gasoline and lead from a gasoline, but we have done that. We did that around 2006. But it's still, we have what we call legacy sources. It's still there. It's persistent in the exhaust. And we have dust settling down. We have lead lighters. We have car batteries. These are legitimate uses of lead in radiators. But the issue is when we don't take care in managing the waste that arises from this, then we have issues. Most plumbing was of lead in the olden days, and we still have many of them right now. We use solder, but use solder things. Yeah, it's leaded. So and so forth. And these can get, we can get exposed to them if not handled correctly. So these are general sources of lead. Mercury. Mercury, most of mercury is natural, volcanoes, ashes, burning things, but you still have them, they get washed down into fish. I mean, I'm talking of the normal, natural levels that people are used to. So you get them to the fish, and people can get them into their system. But like I'm going to mention shortly, we have a far more serious exposure pathway in Nigeria, which should be concerning, which we need to deal with. Of course, we have mercury in materials like mercury soap, all the bleaching creams, whatever. Most of them have mercury. So, I mean, mercury is the active ingredient in most of them, and people use them. And we, quite rightly, we are trying to regulate this, but there are other peculiar issues which we are ignoring. We get there, I hope, it's time.
Wow. All these sources of mercury in the environment and lead, some of them, again, are things that people are not aware of. Bleaching creams has mercury in it, and people use a lot of, bleaching creams and toning creams all over the place because they want to become lighter in their skin. And yet, you're saying that mercury is present. And then, of course, there is this popular one that is used in southwestern Nigeria in particular. They call it tiro. Yeah. That's the one that they put, for beauty purposes and what have you, and it's just lead. And yet, people are applying lead to their eyes, and they are not realizing that they are putting toxic, a neurotoxicant right into their body.
From the lead, there be dermal
that even the one they put on their eyelashes
get sweat to the lips, and the rest is.
Wow. And then you are a physicist, and I'm sure you do a lot of soldering in your lab. And
but it's now when you do that soldering in cans, we put food inside. Then that's when it becomes really, really problematic for the public. Those of us occupationally exposed, we try to take as much care as we should. But how about the general public?
Yeah. I remember, I think that was in the year 2004, if I'm not mistaken. 2004, I was in the United States, that was when I was dealing with a major health challenge, that started in 1997. And by 2004, it was, getting to a head. I had to visit the United States because all the tests and the different things I did in Nigeria didn't reveal anything much other than a few normal things, I will say. But when I got to the US, they actually ran some toxic metal tests on me, and they found that I was very high on lead and mercury in particular, those two. My lead level, my mercury level was so high that, that was the first time in my life, in 2004, that anybody was suspecting that heavy metals could have contributed to my health issues. And they had to put me on serious heavy metal detoxification. They gave me some intravenous, some IVs to be able to, chelate them out of my system. Yeah. And that was part of the protocol that I went through. I believe also helped in my recovery, among other things. Of course, I had to change my diet, change my lifestyle, and all of that. But that was 19 years ago. I haven't repeated that since then to see whether it has built up again, but I hope to do that very soon, to be able to know my levels again, whether I still need some detox, to be done in my system. But why is it that in this part of the world, the medical establishment doesn't look in that direction at all when people have particularly neurological problems?
I don't know. It might be political. The kind of curriculum that is put on them. But I think is that the awareness is not. Maybe they have so much other problem on their hand, and they consider it minor. I guess that is the situation. But like I was saying, people getting depressed, getting excited, people are being talking ability, memory. Some people think it's not a big deal, but they're a real big deal, and it is this lead and mercury that it affects memory, it affects so many things, it affects the quality of our lives. And I really wish we would take them more seriously. It's not only when people are so sick that they have to go to the US and study due respect, sir. Because that is when we say there's a problem. But the problem is still ongoing.
Yeah.
And we are not paying attention to that.
Yeah. Now, like you said, the environment is important. I went to the US, I did heavy metal detoxification, my system was cleared of lead and mercury, but I'm back in Nigeria and I live in Nigeria and I've been living here for 19 years and very likely still exposed to it over this period of time. Now, would you like to help us identify what exposure pathways are uniquely Nigerian? Exposure pathways to lead and mercury that are uniquely Nigerian.
Yes, let me start with lead. You mentioned some already, that the TRO is a unique product here used in Southwest, but I also think in the North there is a form of it used. pottery, cooking in pottery depends on the content of the lead content in the clay.
Right. So when people use clay pots, they could have lead in clay pots as well.
No doubt about that. No doubt about that. The one we talked about at Zamfara, it came up in the context of gold mining. They were not
gold mining. Wow.
Yeah, so lead is associated with gold, the galena, so the ore. So it depends. If you are at the wrong place at the wrong time, you could get the ore that is high in lead. And if you didn't know that you should take special precaution, you treated it the way you were treating it before. At Zamfara, we went to Zamfara with the Ministry of Health, my research team. We went with them. And at that time, with all the evidences that were before us, they were still insisting that it couldn't be lead. Part of the argument was that, look, we have been doing this for 10, 11 years. We are doing exactly the same thing. So why now? So it's just that we come across a deposit or deposit that is high elevated in lead, and you are treating it the way you were treating it before. So, so these are pathways to lead. Like I said earlier on, I believe Nigerians' exposure to lead is unique because we had access to petrol was so cheap here. Yeah. There were so many cars, and we used it for more than any other country. 30 years after leaded gasoline had been phased out in other places, we are still using them here in Nigeria. Nigeria was one of the last to use it. Now, the thing with lead is that it is persistent, not just in the environment. It's also is stored endogenously in the bones. Okay. Yeah. And what we have found out, actually, I mean, in my lab, I can show you some of a poster here that we measured lead in traffic wardens. We measured some before, about 10 years before, and we measured some 10 years after, and the lead level, the difference was clear here at Ile-Ife. So it's persistent. And now, particularly for ladies, when they are pregnant or when they have need for calcium, because lead and calcium, they are stored together predominantly in the bones. And when they have need for calcium, and calciums are being released, mobilized from the bones, it is known that lead is also mobilized together with it. So it gets into the blood. It doesn't affect the lady. It's an adult subject, but that lady is pregnant. So it's the same thing as transfers across the placenta to the baby. And when they are doing breastfeeding, the lead goes into the baby. So we have lots of our children being, up to now, exposed this way. And the half-life for this lead in the lung bones is about 30 years. So that means, yeah, so most adults, I mean, and we only eliminated lead in our gasoline only 2006. So most of our women of childbearing age, they are highly leaded as we speak. And those lead will be released, even to remove all the lead in the atmosphere, which we don't. They are there in the car exhaust, in wheel balancing, in the air, and they are everywhere, lead. Now we have the endogenous one, and we have all of them upon us. We should think of lead. It's a big problem. And the problem, except the level builds up to toxic levels like we have in Zamfara, and children are dying, people might say it's not there, but we know it's there. And if you could do something about it, we are all going to, it's better for everybody, Crime rates, IQ, performance in school, all these things are all associated with it. And they affect all of us. Nobody is exempted.
Lead is so insidious from the way you have described lead. And yet, people don't pay attention. It's all over the place. People don't pay attention. I think all of us need to get tested for lead and for mercury to know our status.
we should do that, and we should stay off lead unnecessarily. We should. Particularly for the vulnerable population, which are the children. Right. I mean, you and I, particularly, I won't be so much concerned about my lead. I'm already approaching my 60. I'm going to be 60 shortly. And so my memory is not so much important to me. I'm sorry to say, I'm just joking. But I mean, for those young people, it's everything. Their future is still, my future is still ahead of me, but for those children, so much so. And we are ruining them from the start just because we don't pay attention to what we should pay attention to. I really wish something would be done.
Right. So leaded fuel was a major source of lead in the environment in Nigeria because we used leaded petrol for so many years. I remember there was a time when you get to the filling station and there is leaded and there's unleaded. And the unleaded was more expensive, I believe. And people will go for the cheaper version because they can always, pay less for that, not knowing that we are emitting a lot of lead into the atmosphere and people are inhaling it. And then these things persist in our body for upwards of 30 years. Is there stored in the bones, and it can be mobilized out of the bones and get into the bloodstream, pass through the placenta into the fetus for a pregnant woman. And that little innocent infant is impacted by the lead in the mother's body. And so when the baby is born, the baby already inherited a major problem, even before starting his or her own life. And yet the mother and the father are completely unaware of this transmission that is going on from parents to children because of exposure. And then it causes neurological damages, affects their IQ. We say they are dullards, not knowing that we contributed to the whole process. And then some of them become hyperactive, and they become disruptive, and then they also show some signs of other neurological problems because of this exposure.
Speech delays, learning disabilities, abnormal.
Right. Developmental problems generally. Okay. I think it's a good place for us to go on a short break at this time. And when we come back, we will be talking more about lead, mercury, and a few other cousins of theirs and the impact that they have on our health. This has been Exposé with Tony Akinyemi, and we have on set today Professor Joshua Ojo of the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife in Nigeria, answering questions on environmental pollution with particular emphasis on neurotoxicants, particularly lead and mercury, and the effect that they have on our health and how we can protect ourselves and mitigate the impact of those who already are exposed. Don't go away. We're going to be back very shortly.
Meet Emily. She is passionate about living a healthy life, but finds it difficult to access information on health and wellness.
Cancer is survivable.
That is until she discovered the online healthy living training offered by Reverend Tony Akinyemi on lms.rafainstitute.org. The online healthy living training program is a comprehensive interactive course that covers topics such as nutrition, fitness, stress management, and mental health. The course is designed to provide participants with practical tips and strategies to improve their health and well-being. Emily is now equipped with the knowledge and skills she needs to live a healthy life. Join Emily and countless others in living a healthy life by signing up for the online healthy living training program today.
Welcome back. This is Exposé with Tony Akinyemi this beautiful Monday evening as we are discussing environmental pollution. We started in the first episode to look at agricultural agrochemicals. And then in this second edition, we looked at air pollution. And in this third episode, we are looking at neurotoxicants in the environment, particularly lead and mercury. And not many people are aware of how these things are very deadly to our health. So, Prof, I have read in many articles about fish being a major source of exposure to mercury. Fish. I actually read a particular publication in a Nigerian journal where studies were carried out on the River Niger in Nigeria, and they looked at the fish caught before Jebba and the fish caught after Jebba. And they were trying to compare the amount of toxins, particularly heavy metals, found in them. And they were doing some comparative analysis, and I was amazed at the discoveries that were made, that the fish caught downstream were more toxic than the ones that were upstream because of the waste, particularly of the paper mill and various other industrial waste being discharged that found their way into the River Niger. Now, would you like to address the issue of aquatic life and heavy metals, particularly fish? Should we stop consuming fish? If we should not stop, what type of fish should we consume to reduce our exposure to mercury in particular, and maybe lead?
The aquatic life, the pollution in the aquatic life, mercury in particular, they are products from the terrestrial. So they are washed down. What the interesting thing with why it's so noticeable in with fish is that there's what we call biomagnification. So all the dilute little streams, concentrations of mercury, they are washed down. So two things happen. They are converted to methyl form, which is more hazardous has been found, and biomagnified. They are concentrated. So, right. So I think that's what's peculiar with it. So, but I think we should deal with the problem upstream, because the mercury, the fish doesn't produce the mercury. So it's from the
environment they live in.
Power plants, the coal. But interestingly, one of the reasons people kick against coal burning is mercury, because mercury is released when coal is burned, forcing burning generally, and during cement production. So all of these, and then incineration, when you burn all these electronics, whatever. So it is all of this mercury that end up in the aquatic ecosystem, and it's absorbed by the fish. But the fish, what the fish does is it biomagnifies it and also converts it to more potent forms. So should we stop eating or not? That's a big question. I wouldn't recommend that. We should monitor which ones are toxic, because it's not all environment, it's not all fish, like we just mentioned, upstream and downstream on the same river, different results. So we should check. Number one, we should minimize the source of pollution to start with, and then we can be intentional about which fish, the species of fish we eat, and its location. And also importantly, because exposure has to do with not just getting the materials, but the frequency. So maybe you take it once a month as a delicacy, it still will be okay, as opposed to taking it several times a week, 3 times a week, or whatever.
Thank you, sir. I want to touch on a very sensitive one right now. Globally sensitive as a source of mercury into the human body, and that is certain vaccines. When we say vaccines now, all antennas are up to say, what are they going to say about vaccines now? I understand that mercury and another metal, aluminum, are found in certain types of vaccines. What are your thoughts on that?
That's what I had in mind when I talk of peculiar sources of mercury in Nigeria. And it's very concerning, because we make all the efforts to control these other ones. For instance, NAFDAC will not tolerate any mercury whatsoever in any soap or cosmetic. If you break a thermometer, mercury-containing thermometer, there are procedures that you must follow. You can't dispose all this mercury-containing bulbs anyhow. And it's okay to do that. But why are we straining out gnats and swallowing camels, as it were? Because you mentioned the issue. Mercury in vaccines, some mercury, we have trace levels of mercury. I'm not particularly bothered about those, although there are issues, they are concerning. There are still more than the ones we are running all over about. But how about the intentional? There's a set of vaccines called thimerosal containing vaccines, TCVs. Because they contain the chemical compound thimerosal, which is about 49.6 ethyl mercury in composition, is deliberately added to these vaccines. Why do they do that? So that they can have what's called multi-dose formulations. So you can put several doses in one capsule, in one probe, in one vial. So to do that, so I can reuse it for many people. So they use mercury as a preservative. So the very fact that it's a preservative is due to its toxic nature. It's toxic to the microorganisms. So that is why it can preserve the whole lot, can prevent contamination by microorganisms. And of course, the same thing happens to human. So this has been known. So for over 30 years, the practice has been stopped. This practice of putting thimerosal into mercury. So just if you must have your vaccines, flu, hepatitis B, some of these like hepatitis B, you give it to children, day old. I think it's criminal, believe you me personally, because the baby has no mechanism to take care of it. The blood-brain barrier is non-existent. So whatever you put into the blood, it's going right into the brain. And we know what this thing will do to the brain. So why are we doing this? So that's what we do, and we are still doing that right now in Nigeria. Of course, it's not done almost anywhere else. But we do this because we believe this is donated vaccine, and that's what they can afford. So there's a lot of discussion on this, and I hope, thank God, you are featuring it on your channel. Hopefully, more people will rise up to call the authorities to order and ask them to do what is needed. But that is the situation, sir. Thimerosal is deliberately incorporated into vaccines just for economic purposes, just to make it to save cost, as it were. That is been.
Thank you for highlighting that, sir. So certain vaccines that are thimerosal containing, they contain mercury in them, are not fit to be used on our children because mercury is very neurotoxic. And in the name of vaccines, we are pumping mercury into children's bodies. And this practice has been stopped in other countries. They now use vaccines that no longer contain thimerosal. But here in Nigeria, we are still using those vaccines, and our regulatory agencies are doing nothing about it. They are still endorsing and approving those vaccines to be deployed on our children here. Because of what I do, I am in the health and wellness counseling industry, and I see very, very sadly a number of children that are exhibiting this, autism spectrum disorder. I see a lot of autistic children, and each time I see them, my mind just goes to mercury in vaccines. Now, if this mercury and aluminum can be taken out of these vaccines, then the vaccines will become safer for these children. There was a very pathetic one in particular of a woman, her first child developed autism. Her second child developed autism. And the third one also developed autism. And so the question was, at what point did you start noticing these traits, autistic traits in your children? And with investigation, with quizzing and questioning, it was established that each one of them occurred shortly after receiving certain types of vaccines. And yet the establishment keeps denying that there is no correlation, there is no link between such thimerosal-containing vaccines and autism. But again, we all know that mercury, a very toxic substance, sometimes aluminum, very toxic metal, they are all added as adjuvants to some of these vaccines that are no longer in use in the first world, but are still being used in some third world countries. Some people don't know the difference. They think a vaccine is a vaccine, a vaccine is a vaccine, but they don't know that some contain certain substances and others don't contain those same substances. And the constituents, the ingredients in the vaccine, the ingredients matter. What is put into the vaccine determines the effect it's going to have on the body. Thank you very much, sir, for that. You raised another issue there, another issue that I want us to also speak to today, and that is mercury-containing gadgets and electronic materials, devices that contain mercury. I mean, fluorescent lamps and thermometers and whatever. Our waste, sorry, sir?
I mean, Sphinx. What do you call it? I used to measure blood pressure. Sphinx.
Okay, yeah, that is Sphinx, no, nanometer, yeah, the Sphinx, that's right. Yeah, they all contain mercury. And the way we dispose these things, when somebody's fluorescent bulb burns, they just pull it out, they throw it into their trash bin, and they just, dispose carelessly on the dunghill. And mercury is littered all over the place. What is your advice to us in this part of the world?
Again, education. So, I mean, you know that such hazardous materials, we should be careful in disposing them. They can be disposed technically. I mean, if you do sorting to start with, and we know what to dump, put in the general dump, and what not to put there, then the problem will be half solved. But lumping everything together, burning, we continue to have this problem. So we should be educated, and we should try to educate the public and make available the opportunity to segregate their waste and be so treated.
I know that medical waste is treated specially, in particular, in advanced countries. But here in our country, I don't see real enforcement.
Enforcement. Yeah. Here at the university, our teaching hospital has its own waste disposal system, a closed incinerator system, but I don't know what happens elsewhere.
Outside in the general society. Okay. Now let's leave government alone and let's come to ourselves as individuals. How can we help ourselves to mitigate this situation? What actions can me or can I as an individual take, as you as an individual take, everybody out there, what action can we take as individuals to mitigate this situation of neurotoxicants all over the environment so that they don't affect us too much?
So education, we identify the sources, and we are circumspect in our dealing with these materials. Fortunately, there are some other materials that could help. Let me say, for instance, that mining is one activity that brings lead and mercury together. When you have this gold mining, when you do this artisanal gold mining, to get the gold out, they are often mixed with mercury to form an amalgam. So that is what extracts the gold out. And then they roast it. They call it roasting, just burning it, and the mercury is released into the air. Of course, we need to come into the stream and to the fish and whatever later on. But that is done. And another big source of lead is in the paint. Currently, there's a global GALP. We are part of it, Global Alliance for Elimination of Lead in Paints. It was such an alliance that actually saw to the elimination of lead in our gasoline. It was not the Nigerian government. It was external pressure. So that pressure is ongoing right now to minimize lead in paint, because the lead in paint in other countries, 60 ppm is considered the normal, maybe maximum 500. Here we are in the thousands, 15,000, because of the pigments they use. There are new technology, new products available, but there's no drive for the industry to change. And we say, instead we should leave government alone, come to ourselves. So the issue is we should pay attention to those issues. I have to pay attention to paints that are peeling in my house. Most houses, many houses, the paint will peel off. They are highly leaded. They could be highly leaded. And children, in particular, with their habits, playing with the wall, whatever, and then putting hands to their mouth, they are extremely vulnerable and highly exposed. So we can do something about that. Watch out for peeling paint in your house. Make sure if you have them, let your children, keep your children away from it. It's as easy as that. And so on and so forth. Fortunately, like I was saying, there's this selenium, is another element that is known to antagonize both lead and mercury, and it's quite a good thing. So what we have found out in many places is that lead could selenium could compete for binding sites in the system. So if you have ingested selenium either earlier, well, more research needs to be done to identify that, to clarify. But generally, in the presence of selenium, the toxicity of lead and mercury is much reduced, could be highly mitigated. So we need to find out the actual forms and the right time to deploy. But that is one ray of hope that could be pursued. If I may say this also concerning the endogenous lead issue, lead being released. We are trying to talk to our government here or state government on something like that too. We know that the lead will be released only because there's need for calcium. And actually, it's not original because in Mexico, this has been tried out with good results. We could make sure that calcium is supplied in the other dietary, whatever. Once we can identify the critical time that the pregnant lady needs calcium. So instead of leaving her to go and mobilize it from the bones, in which case mercury, lead is mobilized. If the need is already satisfied dietarily or some other ways, that can be totally eliminated. And it's only for a window, a period of time. So we would recommend, and if the government doesn't do that, there's nothing stopping individuals from doing that. You can put increased diet in your calcium in your diet. I'm not sure right now of the particular time that is most needed, but you can just do that for a while. It doesn't have to be a continuous thing, and that will prevent that mobilization of lead from the bones. So these are things I think we can do. Watch out for paint. Run away from sources. We see burning fumes, incinerator, whatever. Go away from it. If you're in the traffic, wind up the glass if it's done. Hold your breath. If somebody pollutes the air, if somebody belches a fume, somebody just take it as if it's nothing. It's something. If I hold my breath, then I stop it from. I'm not exposed at that time. I can do that for a few seconds and walk away. So these are things we could do at the individual level, which I believe if it becomes habits, it will add up at the end of the day.
Thank you so much. You've given us so many toxicants. Now, we've dwelt on lead and mercury for so long. I know that there is the gang of five. The gang of five when it comes to metals, lead and mercury being the chief. Then we have arsenic, we have cadmium, we have aluminum. Would you like to say a word on that before we round up today, because our time is getting up? Arsenic, cadmium, aluminum.
Arsenic, like you said, there's a gang of 5. And I keep saying, I'm in Department of Physics and Engineering Physics. We value these metals. So we are not against them. They are resources. We are just saying that we should be reasonable and regulate the use. Arsenic, in groundwater, there's some areas. Fortunately, it depends on geography. So once you can identify areas with high arsenic, you are careful. It's carcinogenic, and it can be, because it's soluble in water. It's water soluble, and it's mainly an issue for water. Aluminium is a neurotoxicant. I was listening to a WHO presentation. They said by vaccine makers, they said they are not sure why aluminum adjuvants work. They just know that if you don't put it, the effectiveness you get will be only marginal. So they are highly used, but not just in vaccines. In other places, aluminum could get into our water, particularly when you use aluminum pots, frying pot, and things like that, if you are not careful, depending on the brand. And you also mentioned cadmium. Cadmium is a big one.
So, sorry, sir. Before you go to cadmium, when you were speaking on aluminum, the thing was frozen. We didn't get to hear it. Maybe you can go over what you said about aluminum, sir.
I said aluminum is used as adjuvant in vaccines, and I think you mentioned that. And the actual mechanism of action is not yet elucidated. People say they are not sure, but they know that adjuvants are needed if you want to get a good beyond marginal effectiveness. And I say that the common source of aluminum could be in frying pans, aluminum pans, because when you put them and all that. And I said it has been implicated in Alzheimer. Alzheimer, aluminum is disease, dementia and all that. Aluminum is, so it's a neurotoxicant. It's neurotoxic. Yeah. And for cadmium, I think one of the major places for cadmium is it fertilizers now? I don't know. I can't figure it exactly now. But I know when we think cadmium, we think of the soil, I think it's some type of fertilizers or agrochemicals. In the production process, cadmium is elevated. So it's usually a concern along that line.
So what we are saying in effect is that these heavy metals and metals are actually natural resources that God has endowed us with, that we can deploy for positive use, good use, but then we need to be cautious. We need to be careful not to allow these things to enter into our body systems, because when they get inside our body, they can derange our health, particularly our central nervous system, and cause neurological disorders. And these disorders can be very debilitating, sometimes difficult to diagnose and difficult to treat. So the best way, therefore, is prevention, not to let them to come in at all. So we all need to be well informed, so we behave ourselves, because we get into trouble when we misbehave, when we don't do the right things in handling these very wonderful resources around us. Your closing statements, sir, before we sign off.
Well, I want to thank people like you, sir, who are spearheading this issue of public education. I believe the environment has consequences on our health. In fact, the WHO, there are a lot of studies that says up to 80% of the problems we have, both with longevity and both with quantity and quality of life, they are affected by the environment. And we should pay attention. And particularly, we're considering these neurotoxicants. Where I'm saying that it's not only when people are down with sickness, they have renal problem, they can they are on dialysis or whatever, or they are stuck mad in the street, that we should think of neuro issues, depression, hyperactivity, and all these, learning disabilities, speech disabilities, all these are things we could prevent if we manage more carefully these known neurotoxicants. And particularly, I'm saying that the public needs to rise up and come and fight against this issue of deliberate adding. Because, sir, it's not as if the mercury gets into the vaccines automatically. It's deliberately added just for logistics and economic reasons.
Yeah.
No, it's not acceptable, and we should do something about it. So again, I thank you for the opportunity of giving me to share this with this very wide audience. I'm very grateful.
We thank you more, sir, for finding time out of your very busy schedule to give us 3 episodes. Wow, that's very generous of you, very kind of you. Thank you so very much, sir. And viewers, this is where we draw the curtain for today. This is Exposé with Tony Akinyemi. What we need is not more medication, but more education, for the best prescription is knowledge. See you same time, same platform, next week, 8 p.m. Nigerian time on YouTube and Facebook simultaneously. Share this video with your friends, family, and colleagues. And like I always say, share it with your enemies, and they will thank you and become your friends. God bless you. Bye.
Meet Emily. She is passionate about living a healthy life, but finds it difficult to access information on health and wellness.
Cancer is survivable.
That is until she discovered the online healthy living training offered by Reverend Tony Akinyemi on lms.rafainstitute.org. The online healthy living training program is a comprehensive interactive course that covers topics such as nutrition, fitness, stress management, and mental health. The course is designed to provide participants with practical tips and strategies to improve their health and well-being. Emily is now equipped with the knowledge and skills she needs to live a healthy life. Join Emily and countless others in living a healthy life by signing up for the online healthy living training program today.